You're no longer family. Those were the words that sliced through my heart like a jagged blade. Imagine standing outside the church, dressed in black, your hands trembling as you clutch the same rosary your mother once gave you, only to be told you no longer belonged. But before I take you further, let me introduce myself properly. My name is Ruth Ann, and I want to thank you for sitting with me today. Before we go on, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to know. Now let me take you back to the day I lost both my son and the last shred of dignity his wife tried to strip from me. The morning of the funeral was bitter cold. Not just the weather. No. The chill came from the people who should have been standing beside me in grief. My only son, Matthew, was gone. He had been my pride and my joy, the child I raised on my own after his father passed far too early. I gave that boy everything I had, even when I had nothing. And on that dreadful morning, all I wanted was one thing: to say goodbye. When I arrived at the church, I could already feel the unease in the air. People whispered, heads turning in my direction. But I pressed forward, telling myself I belonged there. Of course I belonged there. I was Matthew's mother. That's when she stopped me. Standing at the doorway was my daughter-in-law, Clarissa, a woman who once smiled at me sweetly when she wanted something, but whose true nature had been revealed long before that day. She blocked the entrance with a stony face and arms crossed, her black veil pulled back just enough for me to see the cold satisfaction in her eyes. "You shouldn't be here," she hissed, her lips curling into a smirk. My throat went dry. "Clarissa, I am his mother." She leaned closer, her perfume sharp and suffocating. "Not anymore. You're no longer family." Then, with deliberate cruelty, she slammed the heavy church door shut, right in my face. I stood there, frozen. The muffled sound of the choir leaked through the stained glass windows. I could almost hear the priest speaking about Matthew's soul, about his kindness, about his life. And yet, I wasn't allowed in to mourn the child I had brought into this world. My knees buckled, and I gripped the railing to steady myself. The humiliation was unbearable. People outside glanced at me, some with pity, others quickly looking away to avoid the shame Clarissa had cast on me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pound on the door until someone let me in. But grief has a strange way of stealing your strength. I simply stood there, tears streaming down my face, whispering prayers into the cold morning air. You know, when Matthew first introduced Clarissa to me, I had my reservations. She was polished, elegant, the kind of woman who knew how to charm a room. But behind that charm, I sensed a hunger, not for love, but for control. Still, I bit my tongue. I thought, if she makes my son happy, then I'll learn to accept her. But over the years, I watched as she pulled him further and further away from me. Phone calls grew shorter. Visits became less frequent. When I did see him, his eyes carried a tiredness I couldn't place. And Clarissa, oh, she always found subtle ways to remind me that she was the new center of his life. And now here I was, standing outside in the cold, barred from the one place I had every right to be. As the funeral ended, people began to spill out of the church. Some avoided my gaze entirely, hurrying to their cars. Others whispered awkward condolences as they passed, clearly torn between loyalty to me and fear of Clarissa. I caught sight of her laughing softly with a group of friends, as though the entire day was some sort of performance staged for her benefit. When she noticed me still standing there, her laughter grew louder. She slipped her arm through another man's, perhaps a cousin or some distant relative, and paraded down the church steps with a cruel confidence. The message was clear. She had won. But deep inside me, though I was trembling, a small ember of resolve began to glow. I didn't know it yet, but that moment, that very humiliation outside the church, was only the beginning of a battle, because Clarissa believed she had stripped me of everything. She thought she could erase me from my own son's life story. But she had no idea that Matthew, my boy, had left behind something far stronger than her cruelty, something that would one day bring her arrogance crashing down in front of everyone. And I would live to see it. The days following the funeral stretched on like an endless winter. My house felt quieter than ever. Every corner carried echoes of Matthew's childhood, the way he used to run down the hallway with mismatched socks, the sound of him practicing his guitar late into the night, even the faint scent of his cologne from the last time he hugged me. Now, all of that seemed like ghosts pressing against me, and I couldn't escape them. But what cut deeper than the silence was the humiliation. Word travels fast in our little town. By the next day, I knew people were whispering. Some called to check in, but their voices carried hesitation, like they didn't want to get caught choosing sides. Others avoided me entirely. The worst part. I could hear the pity in their tone. Pity was worse than anger. It reminded me that Clarissa's cruelty had become a public spectacle. Still, I couldn't stop replaying that moment in front of the church. The way she said, "You're no longer family." It wasn't grief that fueled her. It was victory. And that told me something important. Clarissa wasn't mourning. She was calculating. A week later, I went to the cemetery alone. The air was sharp. The ground still damp from the morning dew. Matthew's grave was fresh. Flowers still piled high from the service. I knelt beside it, running my fingers across the cold stone. "Oh, my boy," whispered. "Why did you choose her? Did you know what she would do to me? Did you know she'd turn me away?" My tears fell onto the soil, and for a moment I thought I heard his voice, not in words, but in memory. I remembered how he once told me, "Mum, no matter what happens, you'll always be my home." I clung to that memory like a lifeline. But grief is never left alone for long. As I stood, brushing dirt from my skirt, I saw Clarissa in the distance. She was walking with a couple of her friends, dressed in a sleek coat, not in mourning black, but in something far too fashionable for such a sombre place. They were laughing, pointing, as though the cemetery were just another place to show off. I ducked behind a row of hedges, not out of fear, but out of exhaustion. I didn't have the strength to face her again, yet I overheard enough to make my stomach twist. "She'll get nothing," Clarissa said, her voice sharp and certain. "Matthew's will is airtight. The money, the estate. It's all mine now. She'll be left with her little shack and her memories. That's what she deserves." Her friends chuckled, and Clarissa's laugh rang out like broken glass. I pressed a hand to my chest. Money? Estate? Of course. Matthew had worked hard, and over the years he had built something substantial. I knew he had a house, investments, maybe even the old family property, but I had never cared about that. I just wanted to be part of his life. Still, the cruelty of her words burned. She didn't just want Matthew's things. She wanted to erase me, to make sure I had nothing left, not even dignity. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, rocking in my chair, staring at the stars. My mind kept circling around one thought. What had Matthew really written in his will? Clarissa was so confident, so smug. It made me wonder, had she pressured him into something? Had she twisted his hand? My son wasn't foolish, but love can blind even the wisest of men. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. It was from Matthew's lawyer, Mr. Whitaker. I'd known him for years. He was a fair man, one who had always treated me with respect. The letter was formal, inviting me to the reading of the will. My heart thudded as I read the words. Part of me didn't want to go. What if Clarissa was right? What if Matthew had left me nothing? The thought of sitting in that office, watching her gloat in front of me, made my stomach churn. But another part of me, the stronger part, knew I had to be there. Not for money, not for property, but for the truth. I needed to hear my son's final words. I needed to know if he had truly forgotten me, or if somewhere, buried beneath Clarissa's influence, his love for me still lived. The day of the will reading arrived. I dressed carefully, not in mourning black this time, but in a deep navy dress Matthew had once complimented me on. "You look elegant, Mom," he had said, years ago, and I carried those words with me as armor. When I walked into the lawyer's office, Clarissa was already there. She sat with perfect posture, her lips curled into that familiar, smug smile. Her friends weren't with her this time. She didn't need them. She had all the confidence of a queen awaiting her coronation. "Well, look who decided to show up," she said, her tone dripping with mock sympathy. "Don't worry, this won't take long. You'll be on your way soon enough." I took a deep breath and met her gaze. For the first time since the funeral, I didn't feel small. I felt ready. Whatever the truth was, I was about to hear it. Mr. Whittaker entered the room with a stack of papers. His eyes softened when he saw me, and he gave a small nod. "Shall we begin?" he asked. And just like that, the room fell silent, the air thick with anticipation. The ticking of the clock on the wall seemed louder than usual. Every second stretched into an eternity as Mr. Whittaker adjusted his glasses and opened the thick folder before him. The polished oak table reflected the tension in the room. Clarissa sitting tall and smug, me sitting quiet but steady, my hands clasped together to stop their trembling. "First of all," Mr. Whittaker began, "I want to extend my condolences once more. Matthew was a good man, and he will be missed." His voice was calm, professional, but those words made my throat tighten. For a moment, I thought about Matthew as a little boy again, running into the house after school, his hair sticking out in every direction, his smile bright enough to chase away even the darkest day. Clarissa cleared her throat, impatient. Yes, yes, thank you, Mr. Whittaker. Can we proceed?" Her tone was icy, her lips twitching as though she already knew what was written in those papers. Mr. Whittaker shot her a glance, then continued. "The will begins with smaller personal effects," he said. "Matthew left his watch collection to his cousin Henry." Clarissa rolled her eyes dramatically. "A watch collection? Please, let's not waste time with the trinkets." But to me, it wasn't just trinkets. Each bequest felt like a piece of Matthew's heart being placed carefully in the hands of those who had mattered to him. His old guitar went to a lifelong friend, his books to a local library, his savings bonds divided among a couple of charities he supported. Each detail painted the picture of a man who thought of others even in death. I sat quietly, absorbing every word, but Clarissa shifted in her chair like a cat waiting to pounce. I could feel her impatience boiling, her smirk growing wider as the lawyer flipped through the pages. Finally, Mr. Whittaker reached the section everyone in the room had been waiting for. He cleared his throat, the faintest pause before continuing. "And, as for the remainder of the estate," Clarissa straightened, her hands smoothing her skirt. "Finally," she muttered under her breath, "including property, financial accounts, and any assets not otherwise specified." Her eyes gleamed. "Matthew leaves them in full to his wife, Clarissa." Her smile broke into a victorious laugh. She tilted her head toward me, her eyes sparkling with malice. "Well, well, Ruth Ann," she said, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. "I told you. You'll leave here with nothing." The words echoed in my head, just like they had at the funeral. Only this time they stung less, because I could see something else in the room. The lawyer wasn't closing the file. His finger lingered on the page, his eyes scanning further. But Clarissa didn't notice. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs with satisfaction, her laughter filling the room. "I'll be sure to take good care of the estate," she added, smirking. "Not that it concerns you any more." I remained silent. My heart hurt, yes, but something about Mr. Whitaker's expression gave me pause. He wasn't finished. Clarissa, oblivious, reached for her purse as if to gather her things, ready to leave triumphantly. She even had the nerve to pat my hand. Mock sympathy written all over her face. "Don't take it too hard," she said, smiling wide. "Maybe the church needs volunteers. You could find some purpose there." But before she could rise, Mr. Whitaker spoke again. "Actually," he said, his voice firm now, "there is one final clause." The words dropped into the room like a stone into still water. Clarissa froze, her laughter cut short. She turned slowly, her smile faltering. "What do you mean?" Mr. Whitaker adjusted his glasses again, his eyes narrowing just slightly as he flipped to the final page. Matthew included a specific provision, one that supersedes the general distribution of assets. It was his express wish that this clause be read aloud in the presence of both of you. I felt my breath catch. My heart pounded in my chest. Clarissa blinked rapidly, her confidence flickering for the first time since we entered the room. That can't be right. I was told—" She stopped herself quickly, her cheeks flushing with frustration. Mr. Whitaker ignored her. His voice grew steadier as he began to read. "In the event of my passing, I leave the family mansion, located on Ridgewood Hill, to—" He paused for a moment, looking between us. Clarissa's knuckles whitened as she gripped the arms of her chair. My pulse thundered in my ears. "To my mother, Ruth Ann." Silence. Pure, deafening silence. For a heartbeat, I thought I had misheard him. Clarissa's jaw literally dropped, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. The colour drained from her face, and the smug smile she had worn so proudly dissolved into nothing. Me? The mansion? I sat frozen, staring at the lawyer, my hands trembling as the weight of those words sank in. I hadn't expected it. I hadn't even dared to hope. But Matthew, my boy, had left me the very thing Clarissa thought she had secured for herself. And suddenly, everything began to shift. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The words hung in the air like church bells tolling over the valley. To my mother, Ruth Ann. The silence in the room was almost unbearable. Clarissa's face twisted, disbelief etched across every sharp angle. Her painted lips trembled as though forming words she couldn't quite grasp. That has to be a mistake," she sputtered, slamming her hand against the table. "The mansion is mine. He promised me everything." Mr. Whitaker calmly lifted his gaze. "There is no mistake. Your husband was very precise. This clause was handwritten, signed, and witnessed. He was of sound mind when he wrote it. There can be no dispute." Clarissa shot up from her chair, pacing the room like a trapped animal. "This is outrageous. She doesn't deserve it." She jabbed a finger at me, her eyes burning with rage. "She's had enough of his time, his attention, his pity. That house, that estate, is mine by right." I sat still, my hands folded tightly in my lap, my heart pounding. I wanted to defend myself, to shout back, but my voice failed me. Instead, it was Mr. Whitaker who held firm. "Clarissa, sit down." His tone carried an authority that silenced even her. Reluctantly, she dropped back into her chair, fuming, her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. "There's more," Mr. Whitaker said gently, turning his attention to me. His eyes softened, and for the first time, I saw not the lawyer, but the family friend who had known Matthew as a boy. "Your son left a letter for you. He insisted it be read aloud today, in this very room." My breath caught. A letter? From Matthew. Mr. Whitaker reached into the folder and pulled out a single sealed envelope, yellowed at the edges as though it had been handled many times. He broke the seal carefully and unfolded the pages inside. His voice grew steady, solemn, as he read. "To my dearest mother, if you are hearing these words, it means I am no longer there to hold your hand, to hear your laugh. or to argue with you over the little things we both knew didn't matter. I know you must be hurting, and I'm sorry, but I want you to know something. You were the best part of my life, always. My eyes blurred with tears. I pressed a hand to my mouth, trembling, as I heard my son's voice brought back to life in ink. I know Clarissa and you have not seen eye to eye. I know she has pushed you away, and I regret not doing more to bridge that gap. I was weak in that regard. But I never stopped loving you, Mum. Never. Across the table, Clarissa shifted uncomfortably, her face paling as though every word exposed her. The Ridgewood mansion is more than just a house. It is our family's heart. You raised me there. You sacrificed everything for me there. I want you to have it. Not as wealth, not as power, but as a sanctuary, a place where you can feel me still walking the halls, where you can remember that you will always be my home. I gasped quietly, clutching the edge of the table as his words pierced through me. The room seemed to vanish. All I could see was Matthew's smile, his eyes, the little boy who once built forts in that very mansion's living room. I hope you fill it with laughter again, Mom. Invite people in. Make it alive. Don't let grief turn it into a tomb. It belongs to you and no one else. That is my final wish. Mr. Whittaker folded the letter slowly, his own throat thick with emotion. He handed it to me with great care. I took it in shaking hands, pressing it to my chest. For the first time since Matthew's passing, I felt something stir inside me. Not just grief, but love. His love. Even from the grave, he had reached out and wrapped me in his arms. Clarissa broke the silence with a bitter laugh, though her voice cracked under the strain. This is absurd. He was manipulated. He didn't mean that. But the look in her eyes betrayed her. She knew the truth. She had lost. Mr. Whittaker leaned back, steepling his fingers. The clause is airtight, Clarissa. The mansion belongs to Ruth Ann. If you wish to contest it, you can try. But I assure you, you will lose. Clarissa's shoulders slumped, and for the first time I saw not triumph, but fear flicker across her face. I sat there quietly, the letter still in my hands. I had come expecting humiliation, expecting to walk away empty. Instead, I had been given a gift far greater than property. I had been given proof that my son's love had never faltered, not even in his last days. And for Clarissa, well, her carefully built tower of arrogance was beginning to crumble. But little did I know, this was only the beginning of her downfall. Clarissa's face went from pale to crimson in a matter of seconds. Her lips trembled, her fists clenched so tightly that her knuckles whitened. For a woman who prided herself on composure, she was unraveling right before my eyes. "The mansion?" she spat. "The mansion?" He left that to her? Her voice was sharp enough to slice glass. No, I won't accept this. That house was supposed to be mine. Matthew promised. He promised. Mr. Whittaker remained unshaken. He closed the folder and folded his hands neatly on the desk. "I understand this is difficult for you, Clarissa, but your husband's wishes are clear. The Ridgewood estate is now the property of Ruth Ann. It is legally binding." Clarissa shot out of her chair, pacing like a wild animal trapped in too small a cage. Her heels clacked against the polished floor, echoing with every furious step. "This is ridiculous. She doesn't even know how to manage a house like that. She's old, she's—" "Careful," Mr. Whittaker warned sharply, cutting her off. Clarissa stopped mid-sentence, her chest heaving. She turned to me, her eyes narrowing into slits. "You think you've won, don't you? Sitting there like some saint, clutching that letter? But you don't deserve it. You never did." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My son's letter was still pressed against my chest, the words ringing in my ears. "You will always be my home." That was enough. Her fury only grew in my silence. She slammed her hand against the desk, rattling the pens in their holder. I'll contest this. I'll drag it through the courts if I have to. That mansion is mine. Mr. Whittaker leaned forward, his voice calm but ironclad. You're welcome to try, Mrs. Matthews, but your husband was thorough. He ensured every word would withstand challenge. You'll waste time, money, and whatever reputation you still have left. Clarissa's mouth opened, then shut. She knew it was true. The fight drained from her for just a moment, and in that pause, I saw it clearly. The greed, the panic, the realization that everything she had schemed for had slipped through her fingers. It was a strange feeling, sitting there across from her. Part of me pitied her, this woman who had married my son not for love, but for what she thought she could gain. But a larger part of me felt something else. Justice. Matthew had seen through her, even if it took him time. And in the end, he had made sure his mother was protected. Clarissa sank back into her chair, glaring at me with venom in her eyes. Enjoy it while you can, she hissed. The neighbours will talk. They'll all say you manipulated him, that you guilted him into this. Everyone will know her words were meant to wound, but they slid off me like rain on stone. For the first time in years, I felt unshakable. I didn't need the town's approval. I didn't need her validation. I had Matthew's love, written, sealed, undeniable. Mr. Whittaker stood, signalling the end of the meeting. That concludes the reading of the will. Clarissa, you may leave now. Ruth Ann, I'll need you to sign some papers to formalize the transfer of ownership. Clarissa stormed out, slamming the door so hard that the picture frames on the wall rattled. Her perfume lingered like smoke after a fire, but the room suddenly felt lighter without her presence. As I signed the documents, my hands still trembling, I couldn't help but think back to the mansion itself. Ridgewood Hill, its red brick walls, ivy crawling up the sides, the wide wraparound porch where Matthew had played as a boy. For years, I had thought of it as lost to me, swallowed by Clarissa's shadow, but now it was mine again. Not as wealth, not as some trophy in a battle I never wanted, but as a living memory, a sanctuary of all that my son and I had shared. When the last paper was signed, Mr. Whittaker placed a firm hand on mine. Ruth Ann, he said softly, your son loved you very much. This house, this decision, was his way of showing it. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. Tears welled in my eyes, but this time they weren't tears of humiliation. They were tears of healing. Walking out of that office, the world looked different. The sky seemed brighter, the air lighter. Clarissa may have left in fury, but I left with something she could never understand. Peace. Still, I knew the story wasn't finished. People like Clarissa don't fade quietly, and as I looked down at the mansion keys in my hand, I realized this gift came with responsibility. The house wasn't just mine now. It was a piece of my son's soul. And little did I know, stepping through its doors again would reveal secrets even Clarissa couldn't have imagined. The keys to the mansion felt heavy in my hand, not from weight, but from meaning. For years, I had driven past Ridgewood Hill and watched ivy creep up the bricks, watched the seasons paint its walls in gold, white, and green. It had always been their house after Matthew's marriage, Clarissa's house, a place where I was barely tolerated, a guest in my own family's legacy. But now, as the gates swung open and I drove up the winding path, I felt something stir in me. Nerves, anticipation, and yes, fear. The front door creaked open, the sound echoing through the empty halls. Dust hung in the air like fine mist. My heels tapped against the wooden floors as I stepped inside. Memories hit me like a flood. Matthew as a boy, dragging toy cars across the hallway. Matthew as a teenager, playing the piano in the parlor with stubborn determination. Matthew as a man, walking me through the garden and telling me not to worry, that he was building a good life. For a long moment, I just stood there, breathing it all in. I walked through each room slowly, almost reverently. Clarissa's touch was everywhere. Cold, sterile decor, lifeless furniture chosen for appearances rather than comfort. Yet beneath it, I could still feel the warmth of the home it once was. I could almost hear my son's laughter echoing through the walls. In the study, I found something I didn't expect, a desk drawer that stuck when I tried to pull it open. After some effort, it slid out, revealing a bundle of envelopes tied with twine. My heart stopped. I untied them with trembling hands. They were letters from Matthew, addressed to me. The first one began simply, "For when you need to remember." I read it there at the desk, tears streaming down my face. His words were gentle, full of the same warmth he had shown as a child. He wrote about his memories of us, the nights we stayed up late talking, the meals we shared, the times I comforted him when he felt the world was too heavy. In another letter, he wrote, "I know Clarissa has tried to push you away. I regret letting it happen. Please believe me, Mum. I never stopped loving you. This house will always be yours in my heart." Each letter was like a lifeline, pulling me back from the abyss of grief. It was as if he had prepared for this moment, leaving me breadcrumbs of his love to follow. I spent hours in that study, reading until my eyes burned. By the time I finally stood, dusk had settled outside. I lit the fireplace and sat in the armchair, clutching the letters close. For the first time in months, I felt Matthew with me. Not gone, just present in a different way. But peace, it seemed, was something Clarissa couldn't allow me. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived from her attorney. She was contesting the will after all, claiming undue influence, claiming I had manipulated Matthew into giving me the mansion. The accusations were vile, painting me as some bitter old woman scheming against her son's marriage. For a moment, I feared, not for the house, but for Matthew's memory. The idea of his love being dragged through court, twisted into something ugly, broke my heart. But Mr. Whitaker reassured me. "She doesn't have a case, Ruth Ann. The will is ironclad. The courts will see that." And he was right. The challenge fell apart almost immediately. The judge dismissed it with barely a glance. Clarissa left the courthouse red-faced and trembling with fury. That was the final nail. The town, which had whispered uncertainly after the funeral, now saw her for what she truly was: greedy, cold, manipulative. And for once, I wasn't the one standing outside the church doors in shame. She was. One evening, not long after, I stood on the mansion's balcony, watching the sunset stretch golden across the gardens. I thought of Matthew, how he had run through those very gardens as a boy, how he had chosen this place to carry his family forward. And then I thought of his words in the letter. "Don't let grief turn it into a tomb. Fill it with laughter again." So that's what I decided to do. I invited neighbours for tea, opened the garden gates for children to play, hosted small gatherings. Slowly, the mansion came alive again. It wasn't Clarissa's cold showpiece anymore. It was Matthew's home, and mine. Clarissa faded from sight, her power gone, her influence stripped away. People stopped speaking of her altogether, as though she were a shadow best forgotten. But the mansion, oh, the mansion stood proud on Ridgewood Hill, not as a monument to wealth, but as proof of a son's love for his mother. And within its walls, I finally began to heal. As the seasons changed, so did I. The mansion that once felt like a battlefield slowly transformed into a haven. The laughter of children in the garden, the aroma of tea shared with neighbours, the warm crackle of fires on winter nights. All of it breathed life back into Ridgewood Hill. And in those moments, I understood what Matthew had wanted for me. Not just walls and windows, not just bricks and timber. He wanted me to have home. He wanted me to remember that I was loved, cherished, and never alone. Sometimes, late at night, I would sit by the window in the study with his letters spread across my lap. The words never grew old. They were like a conversation that never ended, his voice echoing in my heart. And though grief never fully leaves you, love has a way of softening its edges. Clarissa? Well, her story faded quickly. She tried her battles, but each one crumbled beneath the truth. The community that once whispered against me began to see clearly. No one openly pitied me anymore. Instead, they respected me. Some even apologized, quietly admitting they should have stood with me from the start. As for Clarissa, she drifted away from town life. People said she sold what little she had left and moved somewhere new, chasing another chance at the life she thought she deserved. I don't hate her. I pity her. For what is wealth without love? What is power without kindness? It's nothing but dust in your hands, slipping away no matter how tightly you clutch it. In time, I found peace in forgiving her, not for her sake, but for mine. Carrying her cruelty with me would have only poisoned the gift Matthew left behind. I've often thought about the lesson in all of this. You see, possessions can be lost, stolen, even gifted away. But love, true love, leaves traces that no one can erase. My son left me his mansion, yes, but more importantly, he left me his heart written in ink, sealed in words that time cannot fade. To those of you listening right now, perhaps sipping tea in your own quiet living room, or lying awake in the late hours of the night, let me tell you this: never doubt your worth in the eyes of those who truly love you. Greed may shout the loudest, but love endures in silence. I was locked out of my son's funeral, shamed before the world. I thought I had lost everything, but in truth, I had only begun to see how deep a bond between mother and child can run. Clarissa tried to erase me, but Matthew made sure I would never be forgotten. Now, when I walk the halls of Ridgewood, I don't feel alone. I feel him. I see him in the way the sunlight falls across the banister, in the echo of laughter in the parlour, in the creak of the old floorboards. And in every corner, I hear his voice reminding me, "You will always be my home." To you, dear listener, hold your family close. Speak your love while you can. And if you have been wronged, as I was, remember this: justice has a way of finding its path, even when all seems lost. I hope my story has touched you today. Before we part, I would love to know, where are you watching from? What stories of family, of love, of heartbreak and healing do you carry in your heart? Share them with me, because in the end, it is in sharing our stories that we keep love alive. Thank you for sitting with me, for letting me open my heart to you. May you find peace, may you find joy, and may you never forget: true family isn't defined by who locks you out, but by who keeps you alive in their heart forever.